Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. Merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss any of the informative uploads I put out, click the bell icon, and finally, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And guys, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's go down with today's second half, shall we? Today's first encounter. A few weeks ago, my uncle and my two cousins came out to visit my mom and dad for a barbecue. We have one every year on the 1st of May because it happens to be my mom and dad's anniversary. So it's the 1st of May and my uncle and cousins come out to the house. We had just moved back in February, so we're all excited to have our first get-together out there. It was really nice. We're situated on a mountaintop with a decently sized yard that is completely surrounded by woods. My dad had plans to clear out a few sections of woods so that he could put deer feeders out, so he could have a chance to get some hunting out there. Well, he hadn't started prepping to begin cutting the trees down. He decided to at least test the water, as he phrased it, and put 8 or 9 trail cams to see if there were any deer worth hunting this year. I had helped him out in the setting up of the trail cams, finding good spots and figuring out what position they should be facing. Then that was the end of that. So while my dad and uncle are hovering over the grill, me and my two cousins had decided to relieve some boredom by playing around in the backyard. We had a trampoline set up. The original owners of the house had decided to include their pool in the deal, along with a volleyball court they made on the far side of the pool, bordering the woods. So me and my two cousins are enjoying ourselves on the trampoline without a care in the world. After a short while, my dad and uncle came to us and announced that dinner's ready. So we all went inside and grabbed our plates, then back outside to the deck and sat down and ate. Me and my dad were the first ones finished eating. My dad looked at me and suggested that we should go out and check on the trail cams. We had done this many times before, sometimes checking them 3 or 4 times a week just to see what was out in the woods. However, this time would be a little different. My dad and I are going around the property checking all of the trail cams. We got to the point where we hadn't only checked one of them, but for some reason we couldn't manage to find it. After searching around for almost 10 minutes, we eventually found the exact tree it should have been on. I remember placing it on this specific tree. It was one of those trees that once you saw it the first time, it was damn near impossible not to recognize it. So my dad came up to me and started looking around, questioning that had I put the trail cam on this specific tree. I told him several times that this was the one that I had placed the camera on. I was 100% positive. So we start circling the tree, looking for any signs of our missing trail cam. While we are shuffling around trying to find it, I kicked something hard. I tripped over myself and looked down at my feet to see what had tripped me up, and there it was. Well, what was left of the trail cam. My dad came over to me and he saw, just as clear as I did, the trail cam was completely and utterly destroyed. Upon further examination of the camera, we learned that the heavy-duty ratchet straps we had used to secure it to the tree had been torn apart, literally. It looked as though something had grabbed the trail cam and just ripped it completely off the tree, and then went to town destroying it. My dad, thinking that whatever did this must have stepped into the range of the trail camera, and maybe we had gotten a picture of it. He tried to open the trail cam, but had no success. This trail cam, which was almost damn near impossible to destroy, had been damaged so badly, my dad couldn't open it. My dad, not wanting to admit defeat, grabbed his knife and exclaimed that he was going to get the damn thing open to at least get the SD card out. That was all he seemed to care about at that moment. So after a few minutes of forcing his knife into the trail cam, he finally managed to get it open. It took him a second to fully realize where the spot for the memory chip was supposed to be was in a tangled mess inside the trail cam. When he finally found the spot of the memory card, he pulled it out, and to his utter disbelief, the card had been broken in several different places while inside of the camera. My dad was beyond pissed at that point, because not only did he lose a $150 trail cam, he also lost any chances of figuring out what had done this. Now, even more upset than before, he said, "Let's get back to the house." He picked up the trail cam, and we both headed back to the house. He told the others what had happened to the trail camera, and then showed them. Fast forward to that night, my dad, my uncle, myself, and my two cousins all went out into the woods, just practically clinging to hope that one of the other trail cams had spotted the thing that had destroyed our other camera, since me and my dad had checked them. My uncle went. My dad and my cousins and I were together, so we began checking every single trail cam we had left. My cousins and I were heading toward the location of the third camera just to retrieve the memory card, because my dad had told us all just to grab the memory card and he'll search them out together. We all got about 15 yards away from the third trail cam, and in an instant a chill ran from the top of my head all the way down to my feet. I told my cousins about this, and they said, "We know, we feel it too." We all started panning, looking to see if we could see anything. Then I picked up on something in the direction we were heading to get the camera. I saw a figure. Me, thinking it's either my dad or uncle, called out, saying, "Hello!" Then it looked right at me and my cousins. I knew immediately that it was neither my dad nor my uncle because it had glowing red eyes. At first glance, I thought maybe it was an animal like a deer, thinking that it's just reflecting the light from our flashlights back to us. But that theory went straight through the window when we turned our flashlights away from it, and then it stood up. I watched in utter horror and disbelief as this thing stood up very slowly, from about the level of a deer to about 9 feet off the ground. As my cousins and I are standing in shock, it let out this deep guttural growl and started to advance towards us. I was the first to snap out of this sort of trance we were in and grab both my cousins to try to get them to move so we could run. One of my cousins managed to get out of his trance as well, and we both tried to grab the other one. My other cousin finally showed a sign that he was out of the trance, and just before I could utter the words to run as fast as we could, this thing leapt into the air and landed on top of my cousin. That took the longest to snap out of this whatever trance we were in. Myself and my other cousin fell to the ground as this creature landed. Then it let out the loudest growl before getting off my cousin and grabbing him by his throat. The creature lifted him up off the ground and roared directly into his face before looking at my other cousin and I. The creature threw the first cousin away, and then hit my cousin across the face, causing him to fall back to the ground. Then it stared directly at me. It took one gigantic step forward and lifted me off the ground as well. Then did the same roar it had done to my cousin, only much louder. I yelled for my cousins to run if they could. One cousin was helping his brother get back to his feet after being thrown, and they looked at each other, then at the creature, and decided there was only one thing to do. In desperation, they had picked up a fallen tree branch from the ground and charged at this creature. One of my cousins connected a swing to its head, while the other went directly for its arm. The force of the blow to the creature's head caused it to falter, while the multiple hits to the arm caused it to drop me. My cousins tried to get a few more swings in, but the creature had managed to right itself and caught both incoming blows, going directly for its head. This monster then grabbed both my cousins, one in each hand, and then threw them away, causing my cousins to just drop the branches they were using for weapons and fall back to the ground. All three of us got together and tried to run, but the creature swung one of its arms and connected to all three of our chests, causing us to fall. The creature reared back its head and let out the most terrifying roar I had ever heard, then started to move again towards us. Just then a gunshot rang out, then another and another. All three shots connected to this monster. I looked up just in time to see the creature fall to the ground, appearing to be lifeless. I looked over my shoulder to see my dad and uncle both standing there, as white as sheets, both holding a rifle in their hands. They both hurried over to me and my cousins and told us to run back to the house immediately, fearing the creature was not dead. Both of my cousins booked it back to the house, whereas I did not. I wanted revenge. I wanted it to be dead, for good. I jerked the gun out of my uncle's hands and proceeded to empty the rest of the magazine into this thing's chest. Once I was sure it was dead, I hit it across the face with the shoulder stock of the gun and spat in its face and screamed, "How do you like that?" I handed my uncle back the rifle, which he immediately loaded another magazine into. I walked past my dad and started heading back toward the house, with my uncle and my dad following close behind me. We finally get to the edge of the woods and start making our way across the small field to get to the house. Then out of nowhere we hear several more growls and roars, sounding almost exactly like the creature we had just killed. Hearing this, immediately my dad screams to run. So we did. All three of us started to book it toward the house as fast as we could. We hopped the about 4-foot tall chain link fence that made up the dimensions of our front yard, and then we ran up the stairs to the front porch. My dad and uncle both turned and started firing their rifles. Not at anything, almost like they were trying to scare the creatures off. That was until one of them showed itself. Then both my uncle and dad shot it at the same time. It had fallen to the ground lifeless, and then everything went silent. No more growls or roars were being heard, nothing at all. Everything just went completely silent. All three of us made it back inside the house, and then that entire night everyone in the house that knew how to operate a gun safely had one in their hands or on their person. It stayed that way until the next morning. Then the next morning comes around, against everything that was screaming in the back of our minds. My dad, uncle, my cousins, and myself all went back to the woods. We were trying to see if we could find the bodies of the two creatures we had killed, but to our disappointment we had found nothing, except of course the blood of the creature I myself had dumped the rest of the mag into. That was all we found, just that one pool of blood. Finally, I just wanted to share this. I am not claiming ownership of this. This happened to my best friend and his two cousins. My best friend just decided to share this experience with me. Sharing this disturbed my friend as he tried to recall all of the events of that night that changed his life completely. My friend said it changed him a lot when it came to how he felt about going outside, let alone at nighttime. For those of you who are curious, my friend still lives in that house, although he is scared that anything like that could happen again. He has had no more experiences even close to that night since. In fact, he hasn't seen nor heard these creatures since that night. Anyway, that's his experience. Today's second part of the upload. Hey everyone, I have two things I'd like to share with you. First, in 2019, I was having a very hard time being around people. I eventually packed my belongings up and went to live my life at the age of 30 by myself in the woods. I was scouting an area that was in Delaware County, which is in the suburbs of Philly, looking for a perfect spot to spend my summer. After my long journey testing different areas out, having bad experiences such as my tent flooding after heavy rains, I found a huge hill that probably went up for a few 100 feet. This certain hill was on a giant rock outcropping with many beautiful stones such as garnet embedded in the host rock. I honestly thought I had found the perfect camp, secluded from everyone and everything, surrounded by a large creek. The area was well planted with huge trees of many sorts, so due to all the factors, which being perfect for what I was looking for, I set my tent up right on this top of the hill. The tent I had owned was a one-person tent, literally just big enough for me to sleep in, which was all I really needed. I'm pretty much set. All I had left to do was create a barrier with the local tree branches so I could keep anyone out and hide my tent. Upon stringing up a huge wall of branches in the area and putting trip lines around my campsite, I began to live my life. Many days passed that summer before the incident that changed my life forever. So before I delve into the experience, I want to add that it would be nearly impossible for any dog or anyone to get up this hill. Someone would literally have to be dedicated in finding this place to get to it. During my adventure living alone in the wilderness, my brother would occasionally meet me a bit away to drop off supplies such as beer, food, and water. On a beautiful summer night after it had rained very heavily, I was lying up on the hill right outside of my tent. I was immersed in the extreme dense fog. The whole area looked as if it had been covered with a huge cloud. I was tired from my long walk earlier, so I eventually went and hit the hay at around 10 p.m. I crawled in and lied down with all of my equipment around me. I was extremely cramped in there. I zipped up the door flap and began to relax. I started reading a good book I had when I noticed it was getting really late, so I got my flashlight out and put my headlamp on and just chilled. Periodically, I would text my sister to let her know that I was okay and just converse about certain things. It hit around 1 in the morning, and I started having this strange feeling. You know, the feeling of something's being wrong. I tried to shrug it off, but it wouldn't go away. I lied there with my headlamp on, fully illuminated. My tent had a tiny opening at the top with mesh so you can see out. Other than that, you can't really see anything on the outside. As I was reading, I suddenly heard something run very loudly toward my tent, right on the left-hand side. It stopped right next to me and began loudly barking, almost as if a dog is right in your face about to attack. I suddenly shuddered with fear, saying to myself, that can't be a dog. There's no way possible anything can get to my tent with my barricade and my trip lines, or at least without making an extreme struggle and lots of noise. So in complete fear, hearing this beast's growl and bark like a maniac, I fumbled to get my phone. In a panic, I started texting my sister saying, listen, there's something outside of my tent, and it sounds really pissed off. She texted me back saying, maybe it's a dog, and I'm like, no, it's not a dog. There'd be no way of it getting up here. The thing stopped harassing me and eventually disappeared about 10 minutes later. I was frightened after I heard what I heard, so I dialed 911 on my phone and held it just in case that thing came back. After an hour passes and nothing happened, I began to relax a little. I kicked off my shoes and cracked a beer and resumed reading my book. Let me just say I've been in the woods for 6 months straight before, and I've never had anything like that happen. So chilling that I get sick thinking about it. As I'm lying there, time starts to pass with no sign of this creature. I was too terrified to even look outside of the tent at that point, plus the ground was covered in fog. 3 in the morning rolls around. I firmly held the phone in my right hand just in case. With a sudden moment pass, I was completely paralyzed. I lied there in a state of fear, so intense that I thought I was going to die. Then something grabbed me. Whatever grabbed me began picking me up and smashing me to the ground. This thing was so strong, I felt like a rag doll. It just kept squeezing me and shaking me as if I was nothing. I looked at my phone in my hand desperately, trying to move my thumb to hit dial on the button, but it was impossible. This thing was breathing so loud and making so much noise, sinister, that I got the impression that this thing just crawled right out of hell and wanted to take me and my tent back. The cries from it were almost like a loud pulsating sound, similar, I guess, to a giant heartbeat, out of control. It beat the living hell out of me. I pictured myself being carried away by this horrible thing into a cave to be experimented on or something really evil. After fighting for probably 7 minutes while being completely paralyzed, it suddenly stopped. The state of fear I was in was so intense at that moment. I was free, yet my thumb immediately hit 911. I got the dispatcher on the line, and I thought to myself, what do I say? I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I was attacked by someone. No one's going to come and take me seriously. I hung the phone up and started to text my sister, saying, listen, here's the location. I was just attacked by something. I got no answer, so I kept texting, no answer. I cowered my tent for the next few hours till the sun came out. I was so worn out from the beatdown that I crawled out of the tent in extreme pain. After a complete search of the area for footprints or a sign of something that had been there, I came up empty. No lines were tripped, no branches were moved, and my tent was not damaged. It doesn't make sense. Because I'm damaged, I could barely walk. Eventually, I moved my campsite and got a bigger tent. I still don't know what it was that attacked me. I don't know what that thing was menacingly barking outside of my tent. I'm literally petrified to this day. I now know that there are things so powerful out there they can literally paralyze you by just coming close. Apparently, they can beat the hell out of you through your tent without leaving a sign of having even been there. Was it a Bigfoot? Was it a Dogman? I don't know. But it could have killed me very easily if it wanted to. It could have made me a missing person in a heartbeat. I don't know how I survived or why. I have a feeling that this thing was pissed at me for tearing down giant tree branches to fortify my camp, but not exactly sure. That day I tore a lot of branches down. Then I was attacked, so to anyone out there, if you are camping, don't harm any type of tree or plant that may trigger these things to attack. Same person, second part to their upload. So I was thinking about sharing something. The mysterious black dog that's often sometimes seen in the United States, but a lot all over Europe, especially England. So the tale is that if you see this black dog more than 3 times, you are going to have an untimely death. I've known a bit about this phenomenon for a bit, not exactly sure if it's an actual animal or something like a dogman or a hellhound, but anyway, I have a great experience from a family member that did some strange things, and here's what happened. This family member that I'll call Joe was young, 18, and this was back in the early 80s. He was in high school, hanging out with a few of his friends, searching his friend's attic when they came across 2 very old books. One was the Lemegadon, and the other was the Book of Shadows. Joe and his friends took the books back to Joe's house, and one Friday night, when they got high and were drinking, they took the books out, and from one of the books summoned a demon using a huge drawn-out pentagram. This certain spell in the book was a spell to come across treasure and riches in your life. After the spell, Joe said he felt something weird but shrugged it off and continued his daily life, such as going to school. He would walk to school from his really nice home with a wooded backyard in Bryan Morrow, Pennsylvania. So after the spell, Joe was walking home from school a few days later to his house, which was on a dead-end road, and he came close to the front of his house and noticed a very large black dog sitting on his front door step, just staring at him. He said it wouldn't take its eyes off him. Whenever he moved, the dog's head would follow. Joe, being startled by this, ran around the side of the house through the back door which led to his kitchen. He closed the door behind him and called his dog Prince. Now Prince was a strong shepherd mix and would fight other dogs and usually win. Joe called Prince and didn't get an answer. He eventually found Prince cowering under the kitchen table, very frightened. This creeped Joe out. From all this going on, went to peek out the front door, and the black dog was still there, staring right up at him. Now, Joe's a pretty tough guy, not much really scared him, but something about this dog gave him the chills. He thought it could have been related to the spell. Anyway, after some time, the dog just eventually vanished from his front doorstep, and Joe continued his daily life. And a week from then was having a party at the house where everyone was smoking and drinking. During this, Joe's friend was in the bathroom, so Joe went out to the back porch where there was a row of bushes you could pee in. Let me add that this is very dark and very late. Joe unzips his pants to relieve himself, and he looks down, and there's the same dog staring up at him, silently looking right into his eyes. Joe said he was horrified and zipped his pants back up and ran inside. After this, Joe was absolutely terrified, thinking what had he actually done during that spell. He was sure this thing was a intelligent creature that wanted to talk to him, and Joe did not want to have a chat with it. So we got the two books together the next day and slid them down a storm drain up the street from his house. He could clearly see the two books lying down in the drain when he had left them. Joe continued his normal life when all of a sudden, a few days later, he got the urge to go and get the books back. He didn't know why the urge was so strong, but he went to get them back. And he bent down when no one was looking. He said they had vanished. They were nowhere to be seen. Kind of puzzled, he went back home and continued his life again, and about a week later was cutting his neighbor's grass while his neighbor watched on the front porch. And he said while he was pushing the mower, he noticed the black dog running towards him. It jumped right for his throat, but at that instant it was so close to biting him, while the large white dog jumped and rammed into the black dog. Joe fell over and got up puzzled, like what the hell was that? He stopped mowing and went up to his neighbor and said, "Did you see that?" The neighbor said, "I saw you fall down." He apparently didn't see what Joe had seen. Joe spotted this mysterious dog 3 times and was convinced it was a demon in disguise as a dog to come and make some type of deal with him. He was sure it was summoned from the spell that was done out of either books of the Book of Shadows or the Lemegadon. Joe lived up to the age of 52, had quite a hard life, but was a great person. He got one huge settlement from a back injury, but never found some great treasure or fortune. Joe was also convinced that the white dog on the 3rd sighting was some type of angel in dog form that was fending off the black dog from stealing his soul. Tonight's final encounter. This happened 2 years ago. It was the evening I was driving from my house to the local Walmart. I drove around a bend, maybe 0.2 miles from my house. I was driving slowly because people tend to fly through the road from the connecting lane, and they get into accidents. It was overcast, but not dark yet. I glanced to the side of the road. I always scan the area because random things keep getting dumped there. Occasionally discarded pets that would need to be rescued. I was about maybe 6 or 7 feet from what I saw. At first I thought, oh, a fox, but then immediately recalculated due to the size, almost like my brain was trying to figure out what I was looking at. And then thought, a man in a wolf's costume? It was lying on its side and sort of propped itself up. I got a very good look at it as I stopped my car and stared. It was reddish brown and had canine facial features. It was covered in fur. but the proportions were like a human. It was at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. It made eye contact with me, and it kind of grinned at me. Its jaw opened, and I saw sharp incisors and rows of sharp teeth. I was close enough that I could see the muscle movement in its face and jaw when it did that. That's the part where I slowly started the car and thought, that's not a human. It kept eye contact with me as I drove around the bend until I was out of view. It was almost as if it was saying, I know you see me, I can see you too. It didn't seem aggressive or angry, almost like it was amused. My coping mechanism from what I call crazy crap is to go emotionally numb and, like a robot, focus on the immediate task. So that day I kept driving and got the items I needed from the store, almost like I was in low-level shock. When I drove back, the creature was not there. I didn't feel the fear that some people have described, but there was an awareness that this was a predator above the human step in the food pyramid, which was unsettling. I also didn't get the vibe it was going to harm me, but that if I tried to attack it, that I would regret it. I don't know if this thing was a dogman, a hellhound, a spirit. After the initial shock wore off, I've been trying to find more info on what this was, and I've found very little. It's been 2 years, and I haven't seen it since, and I am glad I haven't. All right, guys, what an amazing second half. Very terrifying. I cannot fathom buying new property and, just setting up some trail cams thinking I'm going to, maybe bag a deer my first year on my property. And instead I have a upright walking wolf problem. Guys, thank you for all the support that you show to this channel. It truly means the world. Tomorrow, Saturday night, live stream coming up. I'm getting excited about it. Just seems like it was only a couple days ago that we did the last live stream. So anyway, guys, stay safe, happy, and healthy, and God bless.